Okay, so looks like we're live. Everybody in the chat, if you can hear me and you want to check in Rudy and just make sure they can hear you.
Hey, how's everyone doing tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for being here. Those that you came over from the Alaska Prepper community, I see a few people there. Hey, look at that! John from Prepper Nation is in the house. He came up from under his rock.
Had to show his face. You know, he wanted to make sure I actually had a sleeveless shirt on tonight. So here we are.
Okay.
But if you guys can hear us, perfect. Let me know. Looks like we are being heard. Okay, perfect.
5x5. We're good.
Awesome. All right. So thank you guys so much for coming to another Marauder Monday. Like I said, you know, we wanted to just put together some kind of a weekly live stream situation over here and talk about things that are pertinent to prepping and staying ahead of what's going on currently throughout, you know, world events, but also talk about some more of the obscure stuff and have a good time with it and not have to be so serious all the time, you know? So I do want to welcome Rudy, aka the Alaska Prepper, over to the channel. He's been here before, but this is the first Marauder Monday. So welcome, Rudy.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you for having me. Always
yeah, of
nice
course. Well, you know, one thing I can say is that if somebody doesn't like Alaska Prepper, it's probably them. That's just what I found anyway. So
well, there's a lot of people that don't like me, Matt.
Hey, that's okay. Welcome to the party, you know. All right. So I do see a lot of great people here in the chat. I want to say thank you guys, especially to mods, Prepper Nation, Rip Curl Readiness. You guys are here helping me out, and I really appreciate that. I want to say I think I saw Prepper Now earlier, too. And then there's some regulars in here, of course. You got JT. Let's see. We've got Hello to Jello for Mello. All right. Awesome. So it looks like we're coming through. And, you know, one of the things that is going on and has been going on is just continually creating problems is the supply chain issues. And it's something that if you watch Alaska Prepper, if you watch Rudy's channel, a lot of what he discusses is how you are putting money into things like food and storing it away long-term as an insurance policy in order to combat against things like inflation and not being able to access those resources in the future due to either supply chain shortages or your inability to even afford it at some point in time. So, you know, I just wanted to kind of, you know, ask you about that, Rudy, and kind of get your mentality on that, you know, with where we're heading right now and all the indicators going off about inflation, you know, what is one of your priorities right now in the sense of being more prepared for that?
Well, really, you know, it depends what, you know, what part of your life you're in. I've been prepping for a long time. So right now I like to say that I'm in the prepping mode of filling in my gaps. So, which means that I pretty much have, I never like to say all because, you know, any prepper that has more room will fill it up. And I'm in the middle of building a bunker, or what I'm going to call the bunker. So there'll be more room here later on. But what I mean by being in the place of just filling in the gaps is that I pretty much have everything I need that I advocate for. So I'm an advocate of having a full pantry of things that you eat. All right. First and foremost, things that you eat every day that sustains life, of having a pantry that will get you through anywhere between 6 to 12 months. So I've achieved that. I've achieved a pantry that will feed my family for at least 1 year. So now what I do is I fill in the gaps. Whenever I see that I've used some of the things or that I've rotated out some of the things in my pantry that is worthwhile making a trip to the supermarket or Costco or the commissary, wherever it is that you may go, I make a trip and I fill in those gaps. But I'm not, you know, how do I say this? You know, when you see panic buyers, you remember last March, not this, but March 2020, there was a lot of people panic buying. A lot of people were blaming preppers for that. You know, I guarantee you, there weren't any preppers panic buying because they already had the things that they needed in their house. You know, I was sitting here watching YouTube, watching people knock each other over for a pack of toilet paper. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, you know, that's where I am right now in prepping is I've already built up a supply where I feel comfortable that if something happens that's a long-term crisis, meaning like more than a month or two, that I'll be able to provide those things to my family that they need in order for us to sustain our standard of living and not have to degrade our standard of living because we'd have to go without, because either it's not there and we can't get it or we can't afford it. And one thing that I really like to tell people how they should look at their preps. It's not only look at it as insurance, but, you know, everyone likes money. And let me explain why I say everyone likes money. Because money is not everything, but in a way it is, right? Money is your freedom. And let me tell you why. Whenever you look at a dollar, you have to look at it as how many minutes of your life did you give up for that dollar? Right?
Energy.
That's how I look at money. You know, that's why I'm so passionate about taxation, and I'm so passionate about inflation and how that steals our freedom, because it is stealing the dollars that we had to give up our lives, either our minutes or hours or our days, to earn. So if you want to preserve some of your life, if you want to preserve some of your freedom, why not preserve it in a way that will allow you to keep your sovereignty should something ever happen? And that way is preserving it in preps. Because in a major crisis, in a systemic crisis, the government is not going to be there to help. And I think that anyone who is rational in thinking would agree with that. That in a systemic or major crisis, the government won't be there to help. So why put yourself in a place by not preparing to have to give up your sovereignty to an entity or to a person just so that they can give you a loaf of bread so that you can eat for a day, because during the good times you failed to prepare. So that's how I like to look at it, and that's how I like to explain it to people so that they understand that it's not hoarding. It's, first of all, preserving your wealth in calories, and also preserving your sovereignty so that you never have to give it up in the worst of situations.
Yep. No, that makes 100% sense. And obviously, you know, like you said, now you're at a point in your preparedness where you're filling gaps and trying to make sure that you have that quality of life you're looking for during a disaster or a situation that's out of your control. But we did talk a little bit ahead of the live chat, and you know, we were talking about how Alaska Prepper is basically like a gateway prepper to a lot of the community. You know, he's trying to get people comfortable with the idea of preparedness without getting too bent on the details, and just trying to get people involved with the idea of putting away something extra to make sure that they're better taken care of if need be, you know? And I think that's a good way to look at it. You know, we do need to have that gateway, because when you get somebody new to preparedness and the first thing you start talking to them about is how many amp hours their batteries for their solar system needs to be in order to maintain their, you know, refrigerator during a disaster, they tend to get lost. And then the next thing you know, they just go back to doing what they did before, which was nothing. And I think it is very important to kind of keep things simple, especially in the beginning, to try to help people get familiar with the whole situation, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, I try to keep things as simple as possible. And it's not a way of me saying that my audience is not smart enough to comprehend, but everyone is different. And if you keep things as simple as possible, as a matter of fact, during my last live stream, I was trying to explain exactly what you were talking about, you know, watt hours and voltage. And I try to keep it as simple as possible so that anyone can understand it. That way they can at least be encouraged to go ahead and do a little bit of research. When you tell someone that a 2400 watt hour solar generator can power a 100 watt light bulb for 24 hours, that makes it very simple. Yep. And maybe they're not as frustrated as they were before. And then maybe that will encourage them to go ahead and look, well, how, you know, what are watt hours? You know, how do you convert volts into amps or amps into volts? You know, I'm hoping to encourage people to do their own research. I mean, I say that 1,000 times, you know, do your own research. But sometimes people need a little bit of a nudge in the understanding department. And the way I do that is by trying to keep it as simple as possible so that they can be encouraged to go ahead and do their own research. You know, one good story that I have is, and I've heard this several times, and it makes me feel very good when I hear this, is that a lot of people who watched my pressure canning videos, they never wanted to try it because they were afraid of it. But then when I showed them how simple it was to do it, and I started out with the thing that people are most afraid of canning, which is meats, proteins. And in my opinion, they're like the second easiest thing to pressure can after beans. You know, dry beans is the very easiest thing that you can possibly pressure can, in my opinion. But the second is meats, proteins. And once they understood how simple it really was, man, I get messages all the time on how, hey, I'm pressure canning my first batch of roast beef. I'm pressure canning my first batch of ground beef or chicken. And, you know, that's great. So I really like to encourage people to try to step out of their comfort zones just a little bit so that they can find new skills that will actually add value to their life.
Well, you have to. And, you know, to be more well-rounded and better prepared, you have to figure out things that you've never done before. And those are things that I'm working on right now. We finally have property. I finally have a home where we know we're going to be here in a permanent way, you know, and yeah, I appreciate it. And, but now I can finally get my hands dirty and start really figuring out like how I want to run a garden, you know, how I want to cultivate the land, what I want to do in the sense of livestock and animal husbandry and everything else. And those are things that I just didn't have an opportunity to spend time on or have the space for beforehand. So for me to go into it acting like I'm an expert on the subject would be false. You know, I am going to be learning just like anybody else who's doing it for their first time. And I feel like, you know, that's a big part of this whole preparedness journey is making sure you're not afraid to do things for that first time.
Absolutely. You know, I'm growing some potatoes this year on grow bags or in grow bags. And my leaves started turning a little yellow. And I showed that in my video. And I knew that I was going to find out why they were turning yellow after I put that video up because, you know, I have a great community. And no doubt, as soon as that video went up, I waited an hour or two and, hey, they need nitrogen. How do I get nitrogen? Hey, a little bit of Epsom salt and water. Look it up. It'll add nitrogen to it. Guess what? I put Epsom salt into water, diluted it. I went out there and looked today, and they're starting to green up a little again. So, you know, it's a two-way street. But in all honesty, I believe that I'm the greater benefactor of the two because I learn so much more from my community members than they do from me.
You know, I think that's actually a kind of an important thing to talk about, too. I often put out videos, you know, and it's whatever subject it's on or whatever piece of gear it might be or whatever it is. There's always a lot of, you know, criticism in the comment section, but not necessarily negative, but just more information that maybe you didn't have at the time that you put out the content or maybe things that you didn't think about before. And I learned a lot from the comment section. And I'm never, you know, upset about receiving negative feedback or criticism of any kind because I actually have learned so much by just putting a video out of something I did and having, you know, 20 people come in and say, wait a second, if you do this, it's a lot easier. And
yes,
I mean, it's made a huge difference.
Absolutely. Let me tell you right now, one of my pet peeves, however, is criticism without a solution.
That's fair.
But I don't run into that very often in the comments section, you know, and, you know, 99% of the time, whenever someone says, hey, P, you should do this instead of that because of this, I'm like, man, that's awesome. Thank you. You know, and there are times where I may disagree. I may be like, well, no, this is how I've done it before. I know that it works for me, so that's how I'm going to do it. But, you know, criticism with solution, to me, that's the perfect combination.
I agree. And honestly, I mean, I get a lot of just fun criticism, at least for myself, you know, like the generalized trolling of, you know, based on looks or whatever, right? Which is always a good time. But the stuff that's really, you know, thought-provoking, I find super valuable. And it's just, you know, people have a lot of different approaches to every different problem. And sometimes someone else's approach is actually better. And it's okay to admit that, you know?
Absolutely.
So I do want to just jump in the comments for just a minute here, try to interact with some of the awesome people here that I know won't be marauders if things go down, but that's the kind of the point here, right? We want to make sure nobody's going around doing the old the old marauding thing. And if you guys have questions, make sure you put them in the chat. And just me and Rudy here will try to get to them as best we can. We'll try to keep our eyes out. But it is hard to, of course, scan every single comment that comes in through the live chat. So,
hey, Matt, somebody said, who is that? Chief. Hey, Chief, what's up, Chief? How you doing? Chief says, two great beards. Hey, but the only thing is you all can tell who's older here.
I don't know, man. I mean, this whole thing up here is starting to get a little bit out of control. So we're just switching sides, I think. You know what I mean? Oh, man. Let's see. So Coral Tiger says, Alaska Prepper, do you see stocks rallying tomorrow or falling more?
I don't really, I mean, I follow the stock market whenever I do a video for my Alaska Prepper News channel because it's a financial video, really. But in all honesty, I'm not going to sit here and lie. I don't care about the stock market because I know that it's a fake market. So, and I know that it's an immoral market. All right. Now, having said that, all right, before I get jumped on a little bit, if you know how to trade the stock market and you can make fiat currency, if you can make a profit from it and then use that profit to turn it into real things, I'm all for it. I am all for someone using a corrupt system such as the stock market to profit from it and then get real things that add value to their lives. So I really don't look at the stock market. I think I put up an article today on Alaska Prepper News, and I talked about how right now there's a lot of articles saying, hey, stocks are going to go up. They're going to continue to go up. This is a great time to invest. And that's exactly what was being said pre-1929. That's exactly what was being touted to the population pre-1929.
Sounds pretty desperate.
October 29th, 1929. And what people don't understand is that this next crash is going to be greater than the crash of 1929. And for those that don't know, it took the stock market about 26 years to recover, meaning to get back to the same level that it was prior to its crash of 1929. That's an entire generation that was lost in the stock market. So I don't believe in the stock market. I don't trade in it. I believe in preserving my wealth. Number one, in stuff, meaning a full pantry and everything that I may need in order to preserve life. And let me go ahead and take a side note on here. That way people can understand what I mean by everything. For someone that's new to prepping or is not prepping and is considering to start prepping, what you want to do is you want to mimic or have a backup to all of the infrastructures that you depend on. So, for example, do you depend on supermarkets? Because supermarkets have their own infrastructure. Do you depend on that infrastructure for food? If you do, then maybe you ought to have your own backup infrastructure, like a pantry that's full in case the supermarket infrastructure fails. Do you depend on water? Do you depend on that infrastructure, utility water? Then maybe you ought to have your own water backup in case that infrastructure fails. Same thing for medicine, same thing for medical, same thing for electricity, same thing for fuels. Mimic the infrastructures that you rely on and then recreate them at a micro level so that they can continue to benefit you in case one of those infrastructures that you rely on goes down. So I think that the best investment that you can make is your pantry and stuff that you're going to need and use in the future. And then anyone that follows me knows that I like to preserve wealth in the form of precious metals. Yeah. I think they have a long history of keeping up with inflation and preserving the purchasing power of the wealth of the time that you put into the fiat currency that you use to purchase them. I do dabble a little bit in cryptos because I think that it is inevitable that in the future, cryptocurrencies will be part of our new monetary system once we turn over to that new paradigm.
Yep. And they're announcing, digital currencies for different governments throughout the world on a regular basis at this point. Okay. So, we have a lot of good comments going on in here, and it looks like there's a little bit of overlap from a few. And so let's see.
Hey, Great Man Prepping's in the house. Sorry.
Hey, how's it going, Great Man? So 76 said, do you see the U.S. economy going the way of South Africa or Venezuela? As well as Amy King asked, what do you guys think of what's happening in South Africa? So there's a little bit of, chatter about South Africa and what's going on there and how it could apply here. And I mean, I think it's obvious that with the level of political strife there and the lack of leadership mixed with a already, desperate population in many ways, that's kind of the equation that you get at the end of the formula, right?
Well, I would say that we're probably en route to end up more like Venezuela with a little bit of South Africa mixed in as far as the civil unrest that's going on there. And the reason I say that is this: it's because our government / Federal Reserve, I like to say they're both in the same. They're both the same. Our government / Federal Reserve, they are in a catch-22, in between a rock and a hard place, however you want to put it. That's where they're at. There is absolutely nothing, except for one thing, and I'll cover that one thing here in a minute. There's absolutely nothing except for that one thing I'm going to talk about that they can do to get out of the situation that they have put us into. Some people would say that they have put themselves into. No, it's us that they put into this. Because, ladies and gentlemen, trust me, when the balloon pops, I guarantee you that those that sit up at Capitol Hill and sit up at the Federal Reserve or the Treasury, they're going to be just fine. They're still going to have chauffeurs. They're still going to have security. They're still going to have food and water. They're still going to have electricity, etc. They'll be just fine. It's you and I that will have to deal with the consequences of their decisions, right? It's just like whenever we go and have a conflict overseas, right? Whenever we have a conflict overseas, it's because politicians failed at their job. And who suffers whenever politicians fail at their job? We do.
Yep.
Same thing with the financial / economic system. Same thing. So there's nothing they can do except to continue to print money out of thin air. They have absolutely no choice whatsoever to continue to print more every year than they did the year before. And all you have to do is take a look at the track. This last year, in 2020, we printed 30% of all of the money that had ever existed in the United States. All right, so listen to that. 30% of all of the money that had ever been printed in the United States was printed in 1 year. And this year, ladies and gentlemen, it'll be worse. Right? They're printing on average $120 billion a month just to buy back $40 billion a month in mortgage-backed securities, which is bad loans, and to lend the government $80 billion a month. In addition to all of the money that is printed out of thin air whenever a bank gives out a loan. When you go get that mortgage and you sign that paperwork, and then the banker signs it and commits that mortgage, that money that you borrowed was printed out of thin air. It never existed before you borrowed it. All right, so the way that money is printed out of thin air the most is by banks lending, is by people swiping their credit cards. That's the way that money is created the most, is by that. A lot of people think it's created by just the Fed lending to the government. No, it's by people swiping their credit cards, keeping debt, and by banks making loans. There's absolutely nothing they can do about it. Now, if they decide to step back and to cut back on the mortgage-backed security purchases and lending to the government, the system's going to crash. All right, plain and simple. If they decide to increase interest rates, the system's going to crash. All right, so they cannot stop printing. All right, period. So where does that put us? It puts us into the path that Venezuela took going up to the day that they hyperinflated. Yep. Now, a lot of people look around and they're like, yeah, I know food prices are up like 30% this year across the board. Around 30% food prices are up. They're like, yeah, but that's not hyperinflation. The definition of hyperinflation is 50% a month sustained month after month. That's the definition of hyperinflation. However, but what they don't understand is this, is that hyperinflation creeps up on you. Inflation keeps getting worse and worse, little by little. And then one day it just skyrockets. All you have to do is take a look at the chart for hyperinflation for Weimar, Germany, and for Venezuela. And you'll see that the S curve started pretty flat. It started getting a little bit higher, and then it just shot straight up. And that's what will happen. It will catch us by surprise. One day we will wake up, and on our way to work, we will see that gasoline is $27 a gallon. Yep. And that's not an exaggeration. Right now, the one thing that they can do to avert what would be a disaster for them and for us is to put us on a CBDC, a centrally banked digital currency. And why is that? Because right now, since loans, since the government rate, since the Fed rate is about 0%, which means that that's what they lend to banks at, is about 0%, right? And you and I have to pay 7, 8, 10, 12, 29% if we're talking about a credit card. But they lend to banks at about 0%. Since the Fed fund rate is at about 0% right now, they have to find a way to institute negative interest rates. And the only way that they can do that is by putting us on a full centrally banked digital currency. Why is that? Because once they do that and they get us used to that digital currency, they will slowly but surely get rid of physical cash.
Yep.
That is the key, to get rid of physical cash. Because once they get rid of physical cash, they can program your money. You can get paid in your digital wallet, and then you'll get a little message saying, hey, this money's been in here for 2 weeks. If you don't use it in the next 2 weeks, you're going to lose 10% of its purchasing power. That's the only way they can get out of it, is if they put us on a CBDC. And if they do that, then, Matt, let me tell you what, they will own our labor. If they do that, think about this. If they do that, they will own our labor. They can do whatever they want with the money that's in there. We will be slaves.
Yep.
So that's why I say get out of the system as much as you can.
And I'm sure they'll still use a system of debt where they technically own the digital currency and can claim it back at any time.
Well, that's why I'm sure you've heard the saying that by 2030 you'll own nothing and be happy.
Right.
Right? Think about it. If you have a digital currency that's controlled by a central entity, by the Federal Reserve / the government, you own nothing. You own absolutely. If you don't own your labor, you don't own anything.
No, that's true. And that's definitely the direction we're going in. And you can see it, I mean, as just a basic ground level example, the fact that this supposed coin shortage is eliminating cash back at grocery stores and big box stores around the country. I mean, it's just the first step, right? Eliminating people's ability to even utilize the cash that they have. And that is something I see every day at any store I've been to lately.
Yeah. But you know what? You know, the last few minutes have been kind of gloomy and doomy. But let me go ahead and say this. Let me go ahead and say this, because by nature, I am an optimist, all right? But I think I'm more of a realist. And what I feel is this. I feel that because of what happened last year, I feel that a lot more people are awake.
Yep.
And I feel that we have shifted into a new paradigm of awakeness, and that people are now questioning the government more. It doesn't matter what side you're on. I think people in general are questioning the government more as to why it is that they're doing the things that they're doing. And I think that eventually it may be a struggle. We may have to struggle for several years, but I think that eventually that good will prevail over bad. I'm not sure if you saw the video, and if you didn't, I understand, because I don't watch everyone's video either. But I did a video, I think it was a live stream, I don't remember, on what's called the Tytler or Tytler cycle. It's Tytler. And it is like humanity's cycle. And it has all of the seasons kind of like that humanity goes through, that a generation goes through. So a human generation is usually, or a human lifespan is usually between 80 to 100 years. And the cycle always starts at oppression. And oppression turns into spiritual, where people try to get out of that oppression by praying and saying, please, get us out of this. And then when they realize that things are only getting worse, then it turns into courage. Well, before oppression comes where I think that the United States is at, which is dependency. I think we're in the stage of dependency. And from dependency, you go to oppression. I think we're right in the middle of that. So unfortunately, it could take another several years. It could take another decade or two before we get up to the courage part of that cycle.
Yeah.
However, I would hope that we can wake up enough to where we can skip that courage part and not have to do bad things in order to win back our liberties. Because anyone in the United States of America, being that the United States of America is truly the greatest nation in the world, and I truly believe that, but we are not free. No. We are not free. We have to, I like to say that we live in an open plantation or an open prison yard, because for everything that we do, we have to ask permission for in one way or another. I mean, try driving your car without a license plate. Try driving it without insurance. Almost every single thing that you purchase or buy has added costs because of regulations for almost everything, if not everything, that we need in order to live.
Yep, 100%. And, actually, I did not see that video, but I am interested in checking it out. And it was
just look it up as Tytler. Very, very interesting. I think his name is Alexander Titler. And the thing about it is that I think he came up with that chart before 1776.
Really?
So it's not like he studied the U.S. and then said, this is what we go to. It's what other, what other civilizations and what other nations prior to the founding of our nation went through. And it's playing out to be exactly how he said. It reminds me of that Titler cycle reminds me of the fourth turning. The fourth turning is kind of like the same thing as it's a cycle, but it's broken up into seasons, like spring, summer, fall, and winter. And according to the fourth turning, if you read that book, right now we're in winter.
And that's not a good place to be.
Before winter is over, things have to get really, really dark before we go into spring and new life begins. So you take a look at it from different perspectives, and each of them are pretty much lining up together. I'm a cycles guy, so I like to look at that stuff. Hey, Matt, that tells you how boring of a person I am. If I'm here talking to you about cycles.
You're not very boring, Rudy. Trust me on that one. There's a lot of watch hours that I've spent over on your channel, so boring doesn't usually keep the attention very well. So I will say, other than jumping back into the comments, which I would like to do here, I also want to go ahead and talk about just another article that I was checking out today and something I thought I would share with everybody. Okay. And something I think that is definitely pertinent to what you like to talk about as well, Rudy. But basically, the Committee for Economic Development has come out saying, that we are struggling, of course, to get supply chain demands back on track, and that the global supply chain is still suffering throughout the effects of last year. And they've given a few different ways to combat it. And I think this is kind of interesting just based on, what they're trying to say here. And if you just give me 1 second, I'll see if I can even pop it up here.
While you're looking that up, man, while you're talking here, I'm thinking to myself, man, it's the Hegelian dialectic. These people created a serious problem by mismanaging the way in which they managed that crisis we had last year. And now here they are telling us how we can fix that problem if we want to take away the pain.
that they created. How interesting.
Example of Hegelian dialectic. Goodness gracious.
Yep. And this is their thought process. This is what they want to let everyone know, the countries around the world, of how to handle this situation. And it's, you want to cultivate additional sources of materials or intermediate inputs, which, okay, sure, yes, get other places to get your resources from. I feel like that's relatively already on the table. Build stockpiles. And when we say that, I mean, you look at what our governments are often doing and what's being reported on, but in different intervals. So one day we're talking about the government is stockpiling food and warehouses full of it. And for what kind of disaster they're preparing for, of course, we don't know. But then you also talk about the government is buying, billions of rounds of ammunition to stockpile as well. And you start looking at all the different stockpiling reports that are going on, and you start understanding that this is all already happening. Invest in research and development. Of course, you want to figure out better ways to approach the problems. Invest in production and maintain standby production facilities. So the idea here is basically very straightforward and very basic, at least in my opinion. They're telling you to do all the things that would prevent you from having to rely on the global supply chain. And to me, this is just another scenario where if we just had more, we would be better. And that's not a good way to approach the situation we're in right now, because if we had more, we wouldn't be in it.
Right. Well, I'm going to say this for the second time. Just like the stock market, I really don't put too much effort into looking at what the government thinks. Because, I mean, why are we, in all honesty, why is our country and a lot of other countries in the situation that we are right now? It's because of government. What does government do? I can name 2 or 3 things that government does that is really good. But what does government do that is good? What does government do that is a positive? They don't do anything that makes anything better. Government is really good at redistributing wealth, which means that they steal your money and give it to someone else. Government is really good at knocking other countries around and telling them what to do or else. And government is really, really good at disciplining other nations that don't want to toe the line. Other than that, I don't know what government is good at. And this is coming from a former government employee, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it took me a very long time. I mean, I'm retired. I'm Army retired, but it took me a very long time to wake up. That's why I don't really put a lot of blame on people that are not awake, that can't see what's going on around them, because we have all been indoctrinated from the time that we were children into thinking that 1 and 1 equals 3, when in reality, mathematics does not lie, and 1 and 1 will always equal 2. So I don't put a lot of blame in people that aren't awake, that don't understand what's going on, and think that preparing is crazy. You know, so I really don't put a lot of stock in what the government says. You know,
No.
What I really put stock on is what they do, because what they do affects us as the citizenry. It affects my countrymen. So I put stock on what they do. I try to look ahead a little bit. You know, I've got over 1,000 videos, and I would say that probably about a third of my videos are probably, like, I guess I can call them news commentaries, where I pick out an article that I think is relevant to preppers, and I put it out there. I think I just put one out here. I think I put one out here today about, hey, get ready to pay more for your coffee.
Yep,
All right, coffee's going to go up 30 to 40%. So go get your coffee now. So I like to read articles like that, you know, that are a little bit thought-provoking, that I can share with people. That way they can do their own research, and they're like, hey, man, thanks a lot, man. You know, I went and got me 20 pounds of coffee, and no doubt 2 months later, coffee went up 30 or 40%. So, you know, I do things like that. I like to look ahead. But, you know, the government comes out with something like, you know, I'm not going to get too much into this because I know how YouTube is. But you know that door-to-door thing they're talking about?
Yep.
Right? I don't care. I don't care about that. They can do that all they want. All that matters is will they do it? And if they do it, how will you react? Right? That's all that matters. You know, how will you react?
Planning to basically be ready for something that's out of your control is just part of prepping. And that is what the government is. It's out of our control. You know, we have a false sense of control through voting and through a democratic process that doesn't necessarily have much regulation. And we're at a situation now where these things will or will not happen based whether or not we agree with them. That's
right. And I say that a lot. I say that a lot on my channel, on my videos. I tell people there's nothing that we can do about it. If there's nothing that you can do about it on a personal case, then all you can do is protect yourself and your family by the actions that you decide to take. So if there's nothing you can do about it, then why even worry about it? If it happens, you're prepared for it. And if it doesn't happen, guess what? You're prepared for anything else. So
100%. Yeah. Well, you know, I've seen a lot of people in the chat freaking out about the coffee situation, you know, and I feel like this would be a good time to break up some of the negative, right? And
you know, I'm not freaking out, Matt, because my community members are so awesome that I think I'm sitting on a 3-year supply just on coffee that they sent me.
But you need that much coffee in Alaska.
That they sent me,
Yeah. Well, you know, I know a lot of the people in here are huge coffee freaks, especially like Prepper Nation. Not to call you out there, but you know, let's talk about something more fun like marauding for a second here. Okay. I think coffee, along with tobacco, and of course, you know, you have your drugs and everything else. But I think that's one of the big ones that are going to turn people and kind of like be the straw that broke the camel's back. That one daily thing that people needed to feel like a regular person that they can't access any longer, you know?
Well, I mean, caffeine is very addictive.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a caffeine addict. I'll tell you that right now.
I'm drinking coffee right now, you know?
I love my coffee. Every morning when I come down, the first thing I do is I go and turn on my jet boil and I get me a cup of coffee. And then I sit here in front of the computer and start doing whatever it is that I'm going to do that morning. It's the first thing I do every morning. And, you know, I love coffee. And it's very important for us to have things that we know we don't need in our preps. For example, can you survive without coffee? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can survive without coffee, but why should you? All right, then make sure that you put it in your preps. You know?
And plus, instant coffee lasts like forever, you know?
What's that?
I said, like, instant coffee lasts like forever if you store it properly, you know?
Yeah, I just did a payday prep where I bought some freeze-dried coffee. You know, I don't even like that coffee that much. My wife drinks it, you know, and I can drink it. I prefer I have two types of coffees that I prefer over anything else. And the freeze-dried coffee that I bought, I think is Taster's Choice or something like that. I bought it because I know that it's got caffeine. And in a world without coffee, guess what? Caffeine is king.
Oh, yeah. And you got to stay up late sometimes, it's just going to be part of the deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and thanks for bringing that up. Thanks for letting everybody know about the coffee thing, because that's just one of those things. We've been beating the drums for just days and days now, months and years, and just saying, get things now because they are going to just be more expensive. And one of the things that I saw in the chat earlier that I can't remember who said it now, but whoever did, thank you for putting it out there. But what they were trying to allude to is that, after this whole giving out stimulus money like crazy, and after giving everybody tons of government money, what's the final outcome there? How do we go back to before the government money was just being handed out? And I honestly feel like we don't. I feel like it's going to be a perpetuality at this point because of the dependency that's been created by it, and the fact that people aren't willing to accept the idea of not being able to receive it any longer.
Well, I mean, I think it's going to continue. I think it's going to continue because once a government implements a benefit, or not a benefit, an entitlement, because it's not a benefit, it's an entitlement. Once a government implements an entitlement, it's very, very difficult to take it away because politics comes into play. A politician's number one job is to get reelected. It has nothing to do with their constituents. It's to get reelected. So, we have a very large part of the population in the United States of America that want that money, which they think is free money, and it's not. They want that money. And a politician, it's going to be very hard for a politician to take that money away.
Yep.
That's why I say, man, I stand by this. Democracy is one of the worst forms of government because it allows 51% of the people to tell 49% how they're going to live their lives. And it allows them to steal from the others, to actually take something from someone else that they did not earn. Now, look, I'm all for charity. I think anyone that knows me knows that. But I do believe that charity begins first and foremost in the home. If someone has a problem, family should take care of that person first. And then after family, if they can't take care of it, then it should be your church. And then if your church can't take care of it, it should be your community. And then going up the line. But it shouldn't start at the federal government because the federal government has nothing to give that it hasn't taken from someone else.
Right. And not willingly either.
Absolutely not willingly. Imagine, I brought this up the other day. Imagine if you were taxed once a year. Imagine if instead of the government taking the taxes out of your paycheck every payday, they sent you a tax bill once a year. How many people do you think would pay taxes?
Nobody.
Why do you think they take it right out of your paycheck? The government gets paid before you. They get paid before you get paid.
It's unfortunate because that money, if it was managed correctly, could be invested and actually have higher returns and allow for those taxes to be paid for more easily at the end of the year. But the average population is not going to be able to do that.
But the thing is, man, with our government, the way it is now, it's not even about money. It's about control. It's about controlling the population. I honestly think that the government has to know what's coming down the line. And that's exactly why they've been prepping for years. Trust me, they have been prepping for years. Why do you think that a hammer costs $127? Why do you think the government pays $127 for a hammer? Because they go ahead and pay the $12 that the hammer costs, and they take the rest of that other money. Now, this is pure opinion, all right? They take the rest of that money that's left over, and they go ahead and they prep with it. They actually prep with it. What's the billions of rounds of, freedom seeds that they've been storing here a few years ago? What's all the money that they've been spending, on food to put away? That's preparing. But preparing for what? Preparing for what? And that's why we prep. Just in case.
100%. And I wanted to jump into chat real quick. I did get something from Jeff Sams. He said, what do you guys think about the latest scandal with Black Rifle Coffee? Okay, because we were talking about coffee and brought up the whole thing. And Black Rifle Coffee has a bad habit of sticking their foot in their mouth on a regular basis. And donating to campaigns of certain political groups that might not line up with Second Amendment support and things of that nature. And what I'll say about that is these guys run a business. This is how they want to operate. And if you're going to support them, you will. And if you don't agree with them, you shouldn't. I will say I did have a video at one point that had a Black Rifle Coffee Company mug in it. And the amount of negativity I received just because of having that cup was through the roof. So I did my research, got in there, try to get some more information about it and try to find out where all the vitriol came from, right? And now I'm a little bit more knowledgeable on it. And what I will say, Jeff Sams, is that I may or may not have had a conversation with Invader Coffee today about a possible relationship. So that's where I'm standing with that, just so you're aware.
Well, man, let me tell you what. If you haven't tried Nutrient Survival Coffee, you don't know what you're missing.
Yeah?
The best darn coffee in the world. And look, my people that are here are probably going to be like, oh, my God, don't get him talking about Nutrient Survival. Because I mean, Nutrient Survival is a long-term food storage company.
Yep.
And they have the most nutrient-dense food in the world. And it is the best stuff out there. I mean, I'm a believer. I love that stuff. And their coffee is outstanding. So do yourself a favor or not, and go grab yourself one of their packs of coffee and try it. You'll love it. It is outstanding. So my two main coffees are Nutrient Survival and Café Bustelo.
Bustelo, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a question, Rudy. With that little flair of your accent there, I mean, do you speak Spanish by chance?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty fluent in Spanish, yeah.
Cool. All right. One of these days we'll have to do a Spanish live stream.
Oh, okay.
I actually speak Spanish as well.
You know what? I like to tell people that Spanish is my second language because I immigrated to the United States when I was 3 years old. So the Spanish that I learned was not in school. The Spanish that I learned is the Spanish that you learn at home. All right. And I started going to school here in the United States from kindergarten on. So I was taught how to speak English in school instead of at the house. Because my parents they could speak English, but not very well. So that's why I say Spanish is my second language. English is really my first language when you really think about it. I actually took when I was going to college a long time ago, when you're like, man, I need to take an easy class to get an easy 2 credits.
Yep.
So I'm like, ooh, Spanish class. I had to drop out because I couldn't hang. I could not hang in a university Spanish class.
A lot of friends of mine who are Spanish speakers and, learned in a similar fashion as you could not hang in Spanish class either for the same reason.
It's very difficult. I mean, Spanish is a very precise language. It's not difficult to learn if you've never spoken it before. If you go to school and you try to learn Spanish and you've never ever spoken it before, then you'll be good. But once you've been ruined like me, speaking Spanglish, I guess you can call it, for 20, 30 years, and then you try to take a real Spanish class, man, it's really difficult.
Well, and I'll say, my goal in learning Spanish was based on where I was working as well as being in school at the time and just kind of taking it on as a second language. But it is something I think that helps with your preparedness. The ability to communicate is huge in any kind of a disaster or an emergency situation. And just being able to talk to the next person, whether or not, they are an English speaker or a Spanish speaker or whatever other language they might speak, can make the difference at some point.
Yeah, man, knowledge is power. Yeah, knowledge is power. So, even knowing an extra language, there's nothing wrong with it. That's great. Yeah,
I agree. And it's been very, very useful throughout my career as well as in my personal life. So something I suggest people trying to figure out if possible. It's not as hard as it sounds, I promise. Because I can do it. So I'm like, come on. I'm like the weirdest looking guy when I speak Spanish to somebody. It kind of pops their eyes out, So let's see here. I'm going to get back in the chat just for a little bit. And then let's see. Trying to get some more questions here.
Hey, Frontier Prepper is in the house. How you doing, my brother? Pony Girl says, I flunked Spanish in school. How you doing, JT? Prepper nerd.
So I'm seeing a lot of people talking about how much coffee they're buying here soon, Rudy. So just want to let you know in case you're trying to look for some new investments. You know that coffee might be where it's at soon. So
I already have my coffee investment. It's in my pantry.
Exactly. That's what I expect from you at this point. You know. Let's see. Dennis Nixon says he knows enough Spanish to get his face slapped, so that's good.
There you go.
All right. River Runner says our local farmers are having a horrible crop year. Animal feed is already in need, and that is something that I think is still spilling over from last year. Last year's crop output was terrible. There's a lot of agricultural failure throughout the year, and we're finally getting caught up to some of those shortages. With all these crop failures and with all this feed demand and everything else that's going on, I mean, are we still just trying to acquire the staples when it comes to food groups, or are there other food groups we should be looking at now while they're still available, such as maybe like corn or wheat, or what do you think?
I think that you should get whatever you eat. That's it. Get whatever you eat, and if you feel that you can get something that will benefit you, like so that you can barter it, then that's fine. But first, get whatever you eat. You know, that's the most important thing. Why would you get 100 pounds of corn if you don't eat corn? Or why would you get 20 tubs of peanut butter if you're allergic to peanut butter? So get whatever you eat and get it in quantity. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, I mean, I get the fear monger comment every once in a while. And I really don't like to come out from the perspective of trying to scare people. Sometimes it's good to scare someone a little bit because it may kick them in the pants enough to wake them up to where they will at least listen and then hopefully take action. But, you know, the supermarkets are still full, but we're still working off of last year's crops. This year, in my opinion, we're going to have a dismal harvest. I think that there's a few states, maybe down south a little bit, that are doing pretty well, and that's great. And I believe that here in the United States, we produce enough food to feed our entire nation. However, unfortunately, China owns us.
Yep.
Think about how much we depend on China for almost everything that we consume. I mean, the computer, the screen, the camera, the speaker that I'm using right now to interact with Matt, more than likely was made in China. Okay, ladies and gentlemen? And not only that, they own our pharmaceutical industry. I think 80% of the pharmaceuticals that we consume, the ingredients come from China. So we're not going to have a choice but to continue to export to them our food so that we can continue to get the stuff that we need, that we are dependent on them for. So the sooner that we can free ourselves from the grasp of China, the better that off that we'll be as a nation once things start getting really sketchy. Because they will get sketchy. It's all a cycle. It's a cycle. Yep,
a vicious one too.
Yeah, and we're going into this mega drought here in the West. It's happened before. It's going to happen again. It's happening right now. I mean, California produces, I think, between 60 and 70% of all of the produce that the United States consumes. They produce like 90% of all of the nuts, I think almonds, that the entire world consumes. They're having a really bad drought that looks like it's going to go on for more than a decade beyond now. It's already been going on for the last 6 or 7 years, and we've got another 1 or 2 decades of that drought. So things are not going to get any better when it comes to food production. And other countries are not going to be able to pick up the slack. I mean, look at Brazil. Like the article I put out, I think it was this morning. There's some farmers there that lost 100% of their coffee crop. Now, if there are farmers down there being affected to that magnitude with a coffee crop, what are they not telling us about with the corn crop? If they have a wheat crop, what are they not telling us about? Right. I always look at the left hand, you know. What are they not telling us about? And you know, last year we had bad luck with that Hurricane Derecho in the Mideast that took out, I think it was like 10 million acres or something like that. I forgot how much, you know, I don't remember. But it took out like 30% of the corn that was ready to get harvested like a month later. And So yeah, I mean, and you can't believe the USDA. They're always changing their numbers around. I mean, why wouldn't you prepare? I mean, when you look around and you look at the history of our government telling us lies, why would you not be prepared? You know, one of the things that I like to bring up the most, because so many people don't know this, is that when our government sent us to Vietnam and committed the lives of more than 58,000 Americans, it was under the false premise that we had been attacked by North Vietnam. And it took decades for it to come out that they lied, that what they said happened, the Gulf of Tonkin, never happened. So why in the world would you take the word of the government over your own, intuition, over you yourself looking around and seeing what's going on? So, I can't say it enough. This is the time to get prepped. And, a lot of people get on me when I say this, but I still think that we have time. I think that we have anywhere between 1.5 to 2.5 years before it gets bad enough to where people are actually going to start going without, where things are going to be scarce and civil unrest is going to hit an apex. So I still think we have time, but don't wait just because I say that I think we have 1.5 to 2.5 years before things get really bad. Get it now. Why in the world wait to get insurance? Get it now before you need it, and you can have it there. And I've never heard anyone complain. No one that I know have I ever heard them complain that they've paid car insurance for 10 years and they've never been in an accident. I've never heard anyone complain about that. So why don't you stock up now and get that insurance now? And if you never need it, then guess what? You can eat it. You can rotate it.
Yeah, unlike car insurance, you can actually cash in if you need to.
There you go.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because, like you said, they're not talking about corn, they're not talking about wheat, but they're talking about coffee because it's considered a luxury item.
Yep.
And so they're telling us everything we need to know, but through a different avenue. Well, There's a drought in Brazil and it's affecting the coffee crop. Okay. Well, it's also because of supply chain issues, and there's cargo containers full of coffee sitting in ports that can't be afforded to be shipped right now. There's like $6,000 for certain different coffee products that used to cost $1,500. It's a whole, spiral of different problems that is causing the coffee shortage. And if you think that they apply those different types of issues to other agricultural products, they do. And if you think that it's different just because it's coffee, it's not.
Well, let me tell you this. I haven't talked about this yet, but this is just something I see coming down the line. If you like corned beef, you better stock up on corned beef. And the reason I say that is because if they're having major droughts in Brazil, Brazil provides about 90% of the world's corned beef. Almost any corned beef can that you get, you go to the store, be it Walmart, be it whatever, wherever you go, you look at that corned beef can, the little square ones, and you look at the top, and you'll see that it has an inspection sticker from Brazil. About 90% of the corned beef that's produced in the world comes out of Brazil. So if you like corn, and if they're having droughts down there that's affecting their coffee, do you think that maybe it may be affecting the harvest or the planting of the grains that they use to feed those cows that they turn into corned beef? Probably.
100%. And I was just kind of checking out the chat, and I did want to mention Domestic Gangster mentioned something that I think is important, and it's something to kind of keep in mind. But if you have kids, prepping is also about having what you need in the future. And one thing that people tend to forget is, like, you need to buy clothes for those kids, and probably in multiple sizes all the way up, basically. And I'm even lacking in that department. So that reminded me that I actually need to go buy some bigger size clothing for my oldest so that she can be good to go in case something happens. But that's something a lot of people don't think about. You buy your shoe size that they're in now, their clothes that they're in now, and then you wait till they grow and get to the next size. But if you don't at least have one outfit of each size all the way up until their adulthood, if something happens, you're not going to be able to access that clothing. And I hope you're good with a sewing machine,
Hey, female feminine hygiene items. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say it. I have a daughter who's a teen. Hey, she's got about 5 years supply of napkins. You know why? Because getting through a crisis with your preps is about keeping up your standard of living.
Mm-hmm.
That way it reduces the stress that you have to endure. And a lot of people would say, well, you can get reusable ones, but why? I can get the ones that she's used to using now. Why not get them now? You know, so a lot of people need to understand that preparing is also a way that will allow you to think clearly during a crisis, because you don't have to worry about female hygiene napkins. You don't have to worry about your corned beef, right? You don't have to worry about if you have to get water from a puddle, because that's all you can find, because you have a filter that will take care of that water and make it potable for you and your family. So it relieves all those stresses from you so that you can then concentrate on the things that are more important at that given time, like security.
100%. And it's also about making the people in your life comfortable too.
Yep.
You know, a big part of surviving is having the ability to mentally survive what's happening. And that comfort is going to go a long ways in continuing people's mental health during a crisis. So let's see here. I'm trying to just kind of touch back into the chat. I want to get interaction from you guys. You know, this has been a really good conversation, Rudy. And, you know,
hey, man,
obviously,
wow, it's been an hour already.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, I know. I was like, I thought people would be getting sick of us, but
I'm having a great time, man. I'm having a great time.
Yeah, no, I mean, and there's so much going on right now in the world that it's hard to kind of keep up with everything, you know? And being able to talk to somebody else like yourself that is in the same level of awareness and has the same concerns and the same ideas of trying to be better prepared, you know, is really, I guess, it's fun. I have a good time with it, you know? It makes you feel like there's yeah, like there's a little validation in knowing that you're not the only crazy person out there. You know?
Well, speak for yourself.
Oh, well, you know.
My wife would disagree with you a little bit.
Oh, trust me. Mine would say the same about me. So at least we have that in common as well. You know, I will say just on a personal level of being out and about and kind of taking mental note of what's happening out there. I have been having a harder time finding like basic supplies at grocery stores, at big box stores. And some of the things I found most affected are in the first aid department, as well as in the vitamins and in the medicine department. I don't know if there's anything particular for the reasoning behind that. I haven't really looked into it very heavily yet, but it is interesting to me that those departments still haven't really caught up or just can't keep up with whatever demand there may be. And I'm talking about basic things, even like hydrogen peroxide, rubbing alcohol, you know, vitamin C, multivitamins. I don't know if you're experiencing similar things at your stores where you are.
No, not really. Mainly because I just haven't needed any of those things. So I haven't gone shopping for those things. But, you know, when I went to Costco, I don't know, a few days ago, I did a real small payday prep. And I'm looking around. I'm like, man, they are very well stocked. And when I see that, I'm like, this is so awesome. Because I'm thinking people can still, you know, prepare. People can still get a little extra every time they go to the supermarket. And it's not going to crash the system, and we still have time to prepare. I just hope that people are taking the time and heeding the warning that they need to be getting extra stuff now. So, you know, I said a while back that I thought that when things things were going to get a little better for a while, and that we were going to have a period of respite or a respite period from all the craziness that was going on last year. And then things were going to take a turn for the worse and would start going downhill. I believe that we are in that respite period. I believe that right now is probably a good time compared to what we're going to see here. Man, I hope I'm wrong, but I think that towards the last part of this year, I think things are going to get worse than they are now. And I hope I'm wrong. I really do. You know, I hope that things, you know, stay the way they are as far as the supply chain goes, or at least get better. You know, the supply chain is not great, but we are being provided with the things that we need that we can go out there and buy. Not being provided, but the things that we need, we can still go out there and buy pretty much. I think that now is a good time to go ahead and just stock up on things that you need en masse.
And I think that touching on that, what I've at least kind of seen is that the level of panic has diminished quite a bit. People are no longer concerned with the idea of not being able to get what they need and are getting comfortable again. The complacency has returned. And a lot of people, the majority of people, haven't learned anything from the last year. So they're going to actually go back to just buying what they need for that day or whatever they need just to barely scrape by and then keep going on from there. And you can see that, and especially if you're involved in, like firearms and stuff, you're seeing that right now at local gun stores, of course. Like there's a lot more on the shelf. There's a plethora of different options now that there weren't there 6 months
not
ago.
In Fairbanks, Alaska.
Yeah. Well, what else? There's still gone up there.
Our shows, like the one place that I go to is called Sportsman's Warehouse. I love that place. Man, their shelves are like almost bare. Like where during normal times you would have like 9 Berettas, right? Stacked up, maybe one now, maybe. And there's absolutely no Freedom Seeds whatsoever. I mean, you have to get really lucky to find Freedom Seeds, but almost everything they have up on their wall, where in the past they used to have multiples. They maybe have one, and I would say that about 50% of their spaces are empty. So yeah, not up here in Fairbanks. Fairbanks per capita, Fairbanks is the most heavily armed city in the United States.
Wow, that's a place to live, huh? Well, and I guess like a lot of what, at least what I've seen, especially in the used department, is a lot of those firearms that were purchased last year are starting to show up on that market.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's concerning in a way because it kind of shows that maybe people went out and bought things they weren't necessarily sure about, or they spent money maybe they didn't have, or whatever it was. But now they feel like we're back to normal and it's not a big deal anymore. And maybe it's time to unload and go back to life as it was before. I don't know, but that just seems like something that could be, I don't know, easily.
Need the money. They probably need the money more than anything.
Yep. And I feel like people are back to being a little more comfortable again. There's not much to worry about. Things are back at the store and unrest is kind of gone. So
yeah. Hey man, what it comes down to is this, man. People are going to suffer. A lot of people are going to suffer. And I'm not one of those people that will say, hey, I told you so. I'm actually one of those people that likes to over prepare so that I can do a little bit of charity should I need to with my neighbors. However, people are going to suffer because what we're going to have, I believe that we're going to have a very large financial collapse. That I think that's what's going to take us. It's either going to be that or the sun is going to get angry at us and shoot a CME at us. I think it's going to be one of those things. I could be wrong, but that's just what I think personally. And what people don't understand is that when we have a financial collapse, we're going to have what is called a liquidity crisis. And what is a liquidity crisis? Actually means there's not enough money. Because right now in the world, there are so many dollars that are owed. There is so much debt in the world that there's actually not enough dollars to pay off that debt. So I think we're going to have what is a liquidity crisis. And a liquidity crisis turns into a resource crisis, because just like in the Great Depression, they had plenty of food and people still starved. Why did people starve? Because there was not enough money in the economy circulating around for people to have money to buy that food. Farmers actually had to till over their crops. Milk ranchers or milk farmers had to throw their milk away because no one had money to buy them. So if we go into a liquidity crisis, you can say that that is the same as a resource crisis, because we're going to have a resource problem. We're not going to be able to resource anything because there's not going to be enough money to go around. And when the Federal Reserve catches up to that, they're going to print like there's no tomorrow. If we think they've printed a lot to date, we ain't seen nothing yet. And when they start printing like there's no tomorrow, we're going to have so much money that it's going to cost too much money to buy anything. Your labor will be almost worthless. Just like in Venezuela, I think that the minimum wage in Venezuela, I believe, is roughly 3 million bolivars a month. But 3 million bolivars can buy you maybe like 4 or 5 cups of coffee or something like that. So your labor will become worthless. So having stuff, you know, I've been called a hoarder a few times. But the fact is this, that during a crisis, having stuff is your best bet, because you can always trade for it for things that you need. So get excess of what you need. Don't care what people say. You know, if someone doesn't pay your bills and they call you a hoarder, who cares? They don't pay your bills. They don't feed your family. Don't care about what people say. Yes, skills are important, but how are you going to be able to practice your skills on an empty stomach? Right? So.
Nope, 100%. And it's just like you've said many times, you know, the shortages aren't always about, you know, not being able to get the resources. It's about not having the resources to acquire what you need. And that's exactly what the liquidity issue would be. You know, yes, there's food available. Do you have the money to actually afford it? And that's a different story.
Yep.
So let's see. You know, I know that there's a lot of people in the chat that are just talking about the coronal mass ejections, or talking about EMPs and the sun and everything else happening right now with that. And, you know, in a grid down situation, it's the same exact scenario, right? If you have food, you have supplies stored away, you're still better off. Is there anything in particular, especially being in Alaska, where you have certain seasons where you have less sun maybe than others?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I have a backup to my back. I like to tell people that 1 is none, 2 is 1, but 27 is a hell of a lot better. But yeah, as far as heating goes, I have backups to backups to backups to backups. So my main heater, I don't think you can see it here, is a Toyo heater. It's a Toyotomi, it's called. And it's a fuel oil heater. And it only requires about 360 to 400 watts of electricity during startup. After that, it's only about 60 watts. However, I try to maintain on hand at least 2 years supply of fuel oil at all times, which actually right now I'm lacking. I'm about 300 gallons short of that, but you know, that'll be taken care of soon. So that's my main heating source. It's very efficient, very economical, and I really like it because of those reasons. And it's very reliable. Now I have a second heating source, which is my backup. So right next to my Toyo, and you won't be able to see it, but it's over there. I had a direct vent, non-electric propane heater installed. So it's a 45,000 BTU propane heater, which directly vents to the outside. It's non-electric. So if something happens where electricity went out for a long enough period where I've exhausted my power resources, I could convert to that propane heater. And for that, I have about a 2-year supply of propane on hand as well. So at any given time, I have anywhere between 3 to 4 winters worth of fuel to keep my house warm. And I would say maybe a little more, because if it was a crisis, I wouldn't be keeping my house at 65. You know, during the winter, we usually keep our house around 65. We probably keep it around 55, right? So it may be a little more, but I can comfortably say that we probably have at any one given time 3 years of fuel for heating our home, right? And then on top of that, I do have an emergency wood stove that I can insert into one of my windows, or I can exhaust through one of my windows that will actually heat the entire house. I don't have the floor plan in our house to actually have a wood stove installed permanently. So I purchased a small wood stove that I can actually make an insert to put in our window and actually vent the wood stove outside that would heat our house. So okay. Yeah, definitely having to have backups. That right there would be my biggest concern as far as having preps that would allow us to stay alive during winter if we ever lost electricity for a very long time. And I mean, in addition to that, I've got multiple generators that run on gasoline and or dual fuel that also run on propane. I really like the dual fuel because propane lasts forever. Yep. You get a 100-pound propane container that will last forever. You never have to treat it. You can set it and forget it and only take it out in emergencies. All right. And I have smaller generators too. I have solar generators. I mean, I have a lot of backups to backups, and I think it's important to have some backups. However, I want to encourage people out there that maybe only have one thing. At least you have that one thing. A lot of people, I think, get discouraged because they see someone who's been in the know, like myself. I've been prepping for, man, I think a decade now or longer. I'm not sure. Almost a decade, I would say. It's taken me a long time to build up to what I have, but slow and steady wins the race is what I like to say. So any of you listening out there who maybe only have a small generator for a backup, listen, you have a lot more than about 80% of the people in this country as far as preps go. You know, anyone that has a 2-week to a 1-month supply of food has more than about 90% of the people in this country when it comes to being prepared. So don't be discouraged because you see a prepper channel that has a pantry with 2.5 million calories. Don't be discouraged because of that, just because your pantry has a 1-month supply of food. Be encouraged that you can do it, because if someone else, especially someone like me, can do it, anybody can do it. I'm just a simple guy like you, Matt. I don't have, I mean, I am the prestigious owner of a 2-year college degree in general education. So I went to high school for an additional 2 years.
I didn't know I was in the company of an academic.
Yeah, I'm an academic. So you know, so I went to high school for an additional 2 years. There's nothing special about me. I'm not, you know, I'm not a collegiate. You know, I didn't graduate with a bachelor's or nothing. And one of the only reasons that I got a 2-year degree is because I promised my dad that I would get a college degree, you know, before he passed away. And a 2-year degree is a degree. So
I have to agree. I don't even have that. So
I have the diploma.
Well, and you know, it's one of those things where I agree with the slow and steady aspect. And
absolutely, yeah.
One of the hardest parts for me actually is finally being in this new location and moving so many times. I moved 4 times now in the last 3 years.
Wow.
It's been really difficult to actually establish what it is I actually want in the sense of being prepared. So I almost feel like I'm starting over at this point in time, which is difficult because you know what would have been possible if you would have invested all that extra time into where you are now. But either way, you have to just deal with what you're given and make it happen, you know?
That's right.
Yeah. And I would not be opposed to you sending me some info about that heater of yours, because it does get pretty cold in North Dakota. And
absolutely, man. Yeah. And look, man, write it down. It's Toyotomi.
Toyotomi.
Yep, Toyotomi. They're made in Japan, and here in Alaska, they're a dime a dozen. They're everywhere. They're very efficient.
Yep, already looked it up. Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and the one I have is what's the one I have? The Laser 730, and that Laser 730, the one that I have, my house is about 1,600 square feet. And even at -45, it still keeps my house warm. So
that's all that matters.
It's an outstanding machine, man. Very, very well engineered, and I mean, it's you can actually service it yourself because it's such a simple machine inside. I think that's what makes it so good, is that it's a very simple machine. The only drawback on that is that it has a motherboard. So it has a computer motherboard on it. So an EMP would definitely take it out. You know, but you know, we can't live like that, you know.
No, I mean, you know, there's a lot of other things that can make the grid go down.
Yeah, so I mean, that's why I have a backup, you know, propane heater that's not electric. But you know,
exactly.
Yeah, it's an outstanding machine. I think it's great. If what do you have? Forced air natural gas or something?
No, actually, it's all electric forced air right now.
Oh, that's terrible. Goodness gracious.
Well, my electric bill is not bad at all, to be honest with you. But,
well, that Toyo right there, I spend about, last year, I think I used between 400 and 450 gallons for fuel. And you have to consider that our last winter lasted from September all the way through almost May. So we had almost 7 months of winter where I had to actually run the heater because it was that cold out. So in 7 months, I averaged about, let's say 450 gallons. That's 60 gallons a month.
Not bad at all.
That's really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the whole system here is electric as of now, and honestly, it makes it easier in the sense of trying to create a backup generator system that only needs to produce one form of energy, but it definitely isn't as efficient when it comes to heat.
Right.
And the one thing I will say is, luckily, the home is fully insulated all the way through, even the garage, so that kind of helps.
Oh, mine isn't. I built my house, so my house is a little drafty.
But that's how you know it was made with love, right?
Yep. My daughter told me once. My daughter was sitting here, I don't know, about a year or two ago. She said, "Hey, Dad, do you know what's square in this house?" And I'm like, "What?" She said, "Nothing."
That's perfect. Yeah, who needs right angles? You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're overrated.
I know we're getting close here. We'll try to wrap it up at about an hour and a half, just because. I'm getting old. That's why. But I do want to mention, all the talk of South Africa and everything else going on in here. I do want you guys to be aware that right now what's happening there is that the citizenry is actually coming together and having to protect their communities, protect their businesses, and they're starting to take the disaster cleanup effort basically into their own hands. And I think that's a thing you can expect in any kind of an emergency situation out here in the United States. But then depending on how long this whole situation would last is how that would devolve into something else possibly afterward. But I think in the initial brunt of an emergency, like what they're dealing with, the community still comes together and still tries to take care of their own throughout that process until it becomes unbearable, I'm sure,
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that our government is great at doing is dividing people. You would notice that this thing that happened last year, this health crisis, it acted as a divider. It divided people even more. But should something happen like 9/11 or Pearl Harbor or something like that, I think that our country would come together and they would not care one bit about who you were, what color you were, what nationality, whatever. I think that it is somewhat unfortunate that I think that our country is at its best during the worst of times.
Yep.
So I think that's somewhat unfortunate, but it is what it is. I'm all about community. My neighbors are awesome. Right? I have awesome neighbors. I've told my community that if it wasn't for my neighbor that lives next door, I'm building a little studio / prepper, room right now that I'm calling the bunker. It's going to be called the bunker. So I want you to come on when I go live from the bunker.
I totally want to do that.
But if it wasn't for my neighbor, I wouldn't have been able to build that by myself. So here. One thing that I've noticed about where I live, I'm not going to say about all of Alaska because I haven't traveled all of Alaska, but about where I live, what I notice is that anytime that I've ever needed help, there's always been a helping hand. But it goes both ways. I remember when I was building this house, my neighbor used to come over without me even calling him, and he would start doing stuff just to help me out without me even saying anything to him. He'd come over and move a load of plywood for me or something while I was doing something else, and I'd come out from doing whatever I was doing, and I noticed that he moved my plywood. I'm like, "Did you just do that?" He's like, "Yeah, I didn't have nothing to do, so I came here to help you." And that's how it is around here. And I feel very lucky that I have good neighbors like that. And as far as security goes, same thing. I mean, I don't know anyone here in Alaska that I'm acquainted with that doesn't believe in the 2A, and that's a great thing. That's a great thing because you know what? A lot of people have a misconception about people that call themselves preppers, right? I wish we had a different name, but it is what it is, right? They have a misconception that they want the end of the world to come, or that they want Armageddon, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah, our time to shine.
It's like I tell people that preppers are like soldiers. Soldiers don't want to go to war, all right? They don't want to take a life. They're trained to do those things, but they don't want to do it. A fireman doesn't want to carry out a 4-year-old child who passed away because of smoke inhalation, but they're trained to do those things. So it is up to us, especially if we are the head of our household, to go ahead and do those things that we need to do in order to prepare in case things happen that are out of our control. So I hope that made sense.
No, 100%. It definitely makes sense. And, you know, it's just, I had the same experience out here in North Dakota, you know, and I met my neighbor recently here. And of course, I'm trying to network and meet more of the community. And one of the first things my neighbor said was, you know, well, I have a skid steer if you need anything. And it's just like, okay, you know, like that's not what you get in a lot of different places that you might live. But apparently where I chose, I have a neighbor who's willing to let me borrow a skid steer.
Man, a neighbor with a skid steer is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a neighbor with a plow.
Yes. Well, he's a wheat farmer. So I've got quite a bit of going on next door, you know.
Hey, but, I'll need you to send me a few pounds of wheat berries from North Dakota.
I'll see what I can do. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Maybe I can start collecting wheat berries from different states.
Ah, that's cool. I like it. Why not? You know, got to have something interesting to do, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, and it's one of those things, you know, location's extremely important. But one thing we have to remember that I think the prepper community as a whole gets really caught up on is that some people are just where they have to be. And not everybody has the opportunity to move to the country or have property or have land or live, you know, in Alaska or anything like that. You know, sometimes you do have to live in an apartment. Sometimes you do have to live in a city. And I've lived in apartments.
You have to live your life. And
right.
And I like to say that we are all in different parts of our lives.
Yep.
You just have to do the best with what you've got, you know. But that doesn't mean that you give up. Only because you're not in the perfect situation that you would like to be in, it doesn't mean that you give up. What you do is you find ways to solve the problems that you may have that are keeping you where you're at. So don't give up. You know, I hear so many people say, "I can't afford that." Well, don't ever say I can't afford that. Say, what can I do to afford that?
Yep.
You know, if you want something, you know, so many people say, well, I remember someone, and this was years ago. This was probably like 2 or 3 years ago. Someone left a comment like, well, it's very nice that, you know, you have a government pension and you make some money off of YouTube. Some people can't afford that. I'm like, well, don't put yourself in that position, you know, that you can't afford it. Tell yourself, what can I do, you know, to better myself so that I can generate some extra income so that I can afford that? Because as soon as you say I can't afford that, it's a state of mind. You know, I've heard this said before and I agree with it 100%. Being poor is a condition. I'm sorry. Being broke is a condition. Being poor is a state of mind.
That makes
sense.
Don't
ever tell yourself that you can't do something. Try to figure out a way that you can do that, something that you want to do.
Right. And I mean, if you look at somebody else who's successful and has the things that you wish you had and think that they didn't have to sacrifice or go through it to get to that point, then you're wrong. Most likely that person had to do a lot to get to that situation. And there are very few out there who are born with the silver spoon, but those exist as well. It's just not the majority by any means, you know. So let's see. We've got excellent people here in the comments. You know, I want to say thank you to everybody tonight. We're right at that hour and a half mark, and I think we'll try to wrap it up here, Rudy, if that's all right.
Yeah, man, I've had a great time.
Yeah, me too, man. And, you know, I want to, you know, try to keep these a decent time limit, but we already went a half hour longer than I usually go, and that's just because we're having a good chat, you know, and that's where I want to be. So, but I do want to say, like, everybody, if I didn't see your questions or something like that, I do apologize. You know, it is hard to monitor all that, but I do appreciate all the input. And one of the best things about these live chats is everybody else in the chat has so much good advice and information to offer that it's just worth interacting in the chat. I mean, and there's been other great channels in here tonight. Gray Man Prepping, Prepper Now, we got Prepper Nation. There's some other awesome channels that are just in there and have excellent advice for you guys as well. So I think these are good things to keep in mind. It's not just about what, you know, Rudy and I were talking about. It's also about what you guys can do to help each other out too.
Awesome. I see so many people out here. You know, I love my community members, man. And I see so many of them out here. I want to start shouting them out and take over your channel, but but I want you to invite me back, Matt. So I won't do that.
That's all right. Well, I am looking forward to my bunker invitation. Okay.
All right. All right.
Yeah, and then one of these days, I'll convince my wife that we need to make a trip to Alaska. You know, I think that
that would be awesome, man.
Yeah, man.
I think that my first live stream from the bunker, I think maybe I'll have in like open forum, so that I can have like you, maybe Prepper, you know, John from Prepper Nation, Gray Man, you know, everyone just call in for a few minutes to say it'll be like a housewarming.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that.
A 121 square foot structure housewarming.
It sounds like a typical studio, in my opinion. So I like it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, you know, it's been a really good chat, and honestly, anytime we interact, Rudy, have a good time. If you want to stick around for a minute after the broadcast, just so we can chat.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate you inviting me today, man. I had a great time. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I haven't been looking over because it looks weird when I look over there, you know, to see who's here and stuff. But thank you very much for joining in tonight, ladies and gentlemen. All right, truly appreciate it. I hope that you had a good time, at least, looking at this ugly mug and that one right there too. Oh, look at that, I did it right.
Let's be honest, yeah.
Hey, you want to see a real ugly mug, Matt? Look at this ugly mug. This is the ugliest mug I've ever seen. Look at that.
You know what? Like, there's just something awesome about your face on a mug. And I haven't ordered one yet, but I was planning on it. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, my daughter did this.
Oh, I thought that was like a Teespring thing or something you did.
No, it is Teespring. But
okay, cool.
Picture, and those are her initials right there.
Really?
Yeah, Little Miss Alaska Prepper.
That's so cool, man.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a good night. Thank you very much for joining in.
Have a good one, everybody. Thank you so much.